All right, everyone. It's Person King again, and welcome to another episode of King Speak. Now, today, we're going to talk about a few things, but for the most part, what I'm going to be talking about is your Sixth Amendment right to counsel and how the budget issues that the federal courts are having is going to affect that when it comes to federal court. Now, here's what I will tell you. Most people don't understand it costs a lot of damn money in order to hire somebody for a federal case. Now, for somebody like myself who had a 4-year federal clerkship, who was a former assistant federal defender, was on the CJA panel, which I'm going to explain what that is, in the Middle District of Florida as well as the District of North Dakota. I've had an awful lot of federal cases from folks from the January 6th insurrection to child molestation cases, to murder for hire, even federal food stamp fraud, drug cases where there were well over 1,000 kilos of drugs involved in many of those cases, because I did both cases. But because of that, it costs a lot of money. It's not like what you would see in a regular state court case where you go and hire somebody for a few $1,000s. For the most part, most things are six figures on up. Meaning that when you look at shows like, Power and stuff like that, yeah, you go to a lawyer for a federal case and, they'll say, yeah, $250,000, you have to pay it all at once up front. Yeah, no payments. So because of that, a lot of people qualify for free counsel. So let me explain that part to you. The Criminal Justice Act of 1964, what it did is it basically kind of determine how the federal government was going to address a person's Sixth Amendment right to counsel. And two things happened. They established the Federal Defender's Office, which takes a lot of the cases, but however, they can only take one defendant on any particular case. So that means that if there was a case with multiple defendants, like the boat cases, where there are multiple defendants, they would all have to have their own private counsel. So they came up with a CJA panel, Criminal Justice Act panel, and you have to qualify for that. You have to be certified to be on it, and the federal government ends up paying you. I forget what the rate is right now, but it's probably somewhere around 160 to 170 an hour, which is way, way less, about a third or as little as 20% of what a lot of attorneys actually would charge normally. However, it supposedly is for, shall we say, indigent people, but it's not really. In determining a person's qualifications for the CJA panel, let me tell you some of the things that the judges look at. They consider individuals' net financial resources and income, their reasonable living expenses, and those of their dependents, the cost of bail, and likely the cost of private legal representation. Now, that gets a lot of people in and makes it so that they can actually qualify for the Federal Defender's Office or CJA counsel. For instance, there was a case I had where this person actually, they owned a home and they had, well over $100,000 in equity, and they had tens of thousands of dollars in the bank, and they had some stocks and things of that sort. And the government said, well, they shouldn't qualify for a CJA panel. And I said, well, Your Honor, when I was in private practice, because of the nature of this case, they would have had to give me $500,000 up front for this type of case. And at that point in time, because that person did not have that for competent counsel, they were able to get a CJA panel attorney. So now that's not the case for all cases. However, 90% of federal criminal defendants get free counsel through the CJA, either panel or an assistant federal defender. Now, here's one of the problems that we have. One of the problems that we have is with all the stuff going on with Doge and the current administration. They have slashed everybody's budget, and the budget was already tight to the point where they had a hiring freeze. Now, what has happened is that now with a hiring freeze and people leaving, they can't replace people. Now, because they can't replace people, your case count goes up. Now, I know everybody's heard, in state court, you've heard that, assistant public defenders in state court have had, 200-300, caseload. You can't come close to that, not even 10% of that normally in federal court. Now, a decent caseload is anywhere from 20 to at most 30, because you will have some cases in there where people are facing 15-year minimum mandatories, people are facing life, and they are extremely, shall we say, don't want to say needy, but that's kind of how you can look at it. But they want an awful lot of attention because the way they see it is that this is my life on the line and I'm going to keep trying to talk to you as often as I can, and you don't necessarily have a lot of time for a lot of things. And not only that, let's just say here in Tampa. In Tampa, we had like 5 different jails that people were housed at. Now, people were housed at jails as far as 2.5 hours away. We would have to go all the way over to Dade for some people, which is almost Miami. That's Dade County. Almost 3-hour drive each way. So that means that to go and see a client for an hour, that was your entire day. And then we had people in Citrus County, which, depending on where you lived or where you were coming from, an hour to an hour and a half each way. And then you had to make sure that you scheduled it so that you could actually see a person. And sometimes they'd be on lockdown. Sometimes things would happen. It would take some time. So that was a long one. Hernando County. Also, we had them in other places as well. Sometimes you would have somebody that was in Polk County. You might have clients in all the jails that actually serve the federal defendants. So at any given time, I actually had clients in all the jails, and I would have to go see somebody in one day in Dade, and then basically the next day this person, I want to see you. So you have to try to arrange to see as many people as you possibly could on that day, so therefore it wouldn't be a waste of time. So for the most part, any day you were going to see somebody, you were spending most of your day at the jail. So when you look at it that way, you really can't have as many cases. And then, when you're dealing with the federal government, it's very different. It's not like the state government where, they don't have anything, you don't have resources. The federal government has all the resources. Not only that, whatever they want, people are going to give them because they're afraid of them. So if somebody comes from the federal government and say, hey, we need your video recordings, from this date, people are going to try to find that stuff. So dealing with the federal government is very different. They investigate very different. I always tell people, I say, listen, you have to think of the federal government when they have a case against you as a mixture of Jesus Christ and Santa Claus. They see you when you're sleeping. They know when you're awake. They know you've been bad or good. They don't just arrest you. You're looking at a state court case. Police arrest you, then they try to make a case. Federal government may watch your ass for years. You have no idea they're watching you. They're following you. They're getting all kind of things. And then once they finally arrest you, they got you. And so it's very different. So in dealing with those type of cases, you have to spend time on them. And then also the amount of time that a person is facing is very different. So, at any given moment, you'll have a client that they've had, a long, extensive history of criminal activity. They've been arrested 30, 40 times. They've been back and forth to jail, for the same thing that they got arrested for on this, but they never did more than 6 months. Now you have to tell them that they are being charged as a career offender or an armed career offender, and they are facing a 15-year minimum mandatory, and there's nothing you can say or do to change that. If they plead guilty, 15 years is the minimum that they're going to get, and they have to do 85% of that. Or if they go to trial, then they won't get all of, shall we say, the credit for taking responsibility and all the other things that they can possibly get for, shall we say, making it easier on the government, which will decrease your sentence and make it so that you actually have a chance of just getting that 15 years, or if you actually can provide evidence to them on certain other things, you might get a 5K1, which will allow them to break that 15-year minimum mandatory in a lot of instances, so then you can get a sentence below that. Nobody can guarantee you get the 5K, but it's very possible, and depending on what district you're in, as to whether it's easier for you to get that or not. So, like I said, it's very different when you're dealing with the federal government. Now, the CJA panel, which are the private attorneys, once you actually make it onto the CJA panel, once you have, enough experience and you've done federal work enough, then you get on the CJA panel. And like I said, you'll be a private attorney that actually you're hired by the government for this person. Here's the problem that's going on. We know that there's a budget crunch. All the money for the CJA panel and the federal defenders, they're lumped as part of the judiciary. So the judiciary has really big budget issues, especially now with Trump being in and not really liking the judiciary. They are really cutting the heck out of their budget. So what has happened? As of July 7th, all of the funds nationwide to pay all the CJA private attorneys have been depleted. What that means is that people have turned in vouchers. They're not going to be able to get paid until more money comes in. They have no idea when that's going to happen. It won't likely happen until October. That's a big problem, because if you take a lot of CJA cases, you could have tens of thousands of dollars or even six figures that you're waiting on. And let me explain to you a little bit about that CJA process. You generally don't get paid until after the case is done. In virtually every federal case, the shortest time, even if a person wants to plead guilty at the very beginning, is going to be at least 4 months before that case is over. Most federal cases take anywhere from 7 months to several years. Now, there are instances where the judges will allow you to for, a partial payment in the midst of a case, but those are under specific circumstances. However, most of your cases, you're not going to get paid until afterwards. And that's not directly afterwards. Depending on the district that you're in, like in North Dakota, I can tell you North Dakota, they paid you quick. I mean, normally, after my voucher was turned in, I got the money. I think the longest it ever took was like 9 days for me to get it after. Middle District, months after it was turned in. A month or 2 or 3 for it to get approved, and then for you to get paid thereafter. At one point in time, I had 5 vouchers outstanding that had been turned in, and that was around $60,000 that I was waiting on. Now, if you do a lot of CJA cases, that ends up quite a bit of your money, or at least for that time period, especially being that you'd already done the work. So now what we're talking about are lawyers who have done the work, may have done the work last year, been waiting on that money, and now they have no idea when they're going to get it. So what's happening is that a lot of lawyers are not going to actually take those appointments for new cases because they have no idea when they're going to get their money, and they need to be out there working and actually earning some money that they're going to get. Now, of course, they will eventually get this money. However, there's some that can't wait on it, and they may just decide to start taking, new appointments once the money is back again, or once it gets closer to the money being back, because you do have to make a living. You have to take care of your family. You have to take care of yourself. So, what we're looking at is that we have less federal defenders because people have left the job because they're getting worked to death, because once people leave, their caseload's just going up and up. And now a lot of the CJA panel private attorneys aren't taking cases. So now those cases they have to fall onto the federal defender's office unless they already have, a defendant in the office, meaning that they have more than one defendant on their case and they can only take one. So what is that going to do? That is going to result in people's Sixth Amendment right to counsel being violated. Because if they have nobody that they can, get an attorney for them, because no attorney will take it because they just not going to, work and get paid next year sometime or kind of whenever, that means that it's going to be violations of their right to counsel, or they're going to have delayed right to counsel. They're going to be sitting in jail for much longer than they possibly should. It's just not going to be good. So they're trying to actually get the federal defender's office to be separate from the judiciary. However, Congress has to do that. And as of right now, Congress not even, appropriating them any money for the CJA panel. It is as if people just don't care about somebody's right to counsel. This is bad. This is really bad because the courts are already just jammed up with cases. It's getting worse because now you have all the things going on with the current administration, and people, are suing because they're, left and right. They are trying to, deport people. They are trying to fire people from all the federal agencies. They're trying to take money from the federal agencies. So you have new case after new case after new case, and you also have a new attorney general who is directing these different offices to file specific types of cases and to file them in a manner that they're going after the harshest of penalties. So whenever you have something like that, have clients who are now facing minimum mandatories, they want to go to trial. So you know what that means? That means that now everybody's going to go on a trial calendar. So there's going to be an awful lot of jammed up courts, and I don't see it getting any better. This is really, really bad. I don't know if you need to call your congressperson or your local senator for your state, but something needs to happen because at this point in time, things look really, really bad. As always, this has been Percy King Speak podcast. Make sure you like, subscribe, and tell me what you think about this so we can discuss this. See you soon.